Look, I am the biggest high-level fanboy out there, but there's something that needs to be said about the SaaS model. Well, a few things actually. And today we're going to cover the top 3 myths I see going around about the GoHighLevel Saas model. We're going to lay it all out on the table, and I'm going to tell you exactly what's going on here and how you should decide whether this model is right for you or not, because spoiler alert, it's probably not. So the 3 myths are: number 1, SaaS is easier to sell as a beginner than agency services. Number 2, SaaS will have a higher retention than SMMA because it's cheaper. And number 3, SaaS has better margins than SMMA. So first of all, sales. I have found software to be way harder to sell than agency services. And I think this is for 3 main reasons. Number 1, business owners already have a lot of these pesky little monthly bills coming at them for a software here and a software there, whatever, and there's so much for them to focus on that they just don't want to deal with another one. Secondly, established business owners have softwares that they're comfortable using, that they've used for 20 years at this point. And so convincing them to switch over to a new software, unless they're in like software buying mode or switching mode, is super difficult. And then lastly, a lot of business owners don't want another demand on their time. They don't want more work, they want less work and more money. And when you give them a software, guess what? It's just more work. And so while you may be able to convince them to start with it, once they see the learning curve on HighLevel, they're going to be like, oh, this is really hard, and they're going to churn. So what ends up happening here is these young kids fresh out of high school, or maybe even experienced agency owners, are like, I see the vision. I'm going to be a software owner. I'm going to start my HighLevel SaaS. And they go out into the market and they start pitching their $99 a month, $199, $299 a month plans to business owners. And they're met with one of 2 things. 1, no, I'm not interested. I already have a software that does this and I don't see the value. Even if it doesn't actually do what HighLevel does, again, if they can't see the value, they're not going to buy. Or number 2, they do end up finding somebody who wants a software like this. However, instead of making $1,000 a month off of a client that needed marketing services, you're making $200 a month off of somebody that you had to get on a sales call with, or maybe even go in person to demo the software to. And guess what? Surprise, they are still just as demanding, have just as many questions, cost you just as much time and fulfillment, and again, you're making $200 instead of $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 off of them. And then when you can't answer all of their questions, they end up churning and going to somebody else. Which brings me to the next myth, which is that SaaS has better retention than SMMA. I hear people saying,
Keaton, once I get my clients onboarded to the software, it's just mailbox money. Like, these people will stay on forever. That's what I heard.
no, they won't. Retention with SaaS or SMMA comes down to 3 things. Number 1, how fast do they get the value? They're only going to stay for a long time if they have an amazing onboarding experience where everything gets plugged in super quickly for them and they see a direct correlation to their bottom line because of what they've purchased. Secondly, how often do they get value? It's not enough to just have an amazing first month. They've got to have a pretty good 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 16th month to stay around that long. And when it comes to SaaS, that includes using the software every single day or every single week. It needs to become an indispensable part of what they're doing as a business. And thirdly, does the value exceed the cost? And this is only going to happen if A, your client is generating enough volume of leads and customers to actually warrant using the software, and B, they actually understand how to use the thing. And in order to help them with both of those things, you're going to have to dive really deep into the education part of running a software company, both on the technical side of using the software and then also on the like, how the heck do I grow my business in the first place side. So when it comes to retention, it's not just like,
Oh, this doesn't cost very much, so I'm just going to keep it forever.
I know plenty of people who are trying really hard to grow a HighLevel SaaS and their churn is just as bad as a bad agency's churn, or worse, because they can't actually communicate the value and there's not enough infrastructure around the software to keep people on it long term. So this brings me to myth number 3, which is SaaS has better margins than SMMA. So here's the thing, to run a successful SaaS business, you're going to need someone to do marketing, someone to do sales or demo calls, someone to onboard clients, actually make sure they start using the software and get situated, someone to answer support requests, and someone to focus on the product and making the customer experience amazing so you don't have to deal with tons of churn. Compare that to running an agency with GoHighLevel, where you're going to need someone to do marketing, someone to do sales calls, someone to onboard clients, make sure they get situated, someone to do the tech fulfillment, so Facebook ads and setting up the HighLevel account, things like that, and someone to answer support requests. So pretty much the exact same team between both of these models. Only you're making $1,000 to $5,000 per customer per month on the agency side, and you're making $100 to $500 per customer per month on the SaaS side. Now, eventually the SaaS side is going to be more scalable and have better margins. I will give you that. SaaS wins eventually. But the question is, can you get to the point where you have the critical mass of users on your software where the benefit of that and the margins of that outweigh the literal 10x markup that you have on your services as an agency versus a software? And a lot of people fail to get there because they run out of money because they're not charging enough. All right, so with all of that said, what is the solution to all of this? Well, there's really three kinds of people that can start a software company using HighLevel. And there's really three things that you need to succeed. The three things you need to succeed are marketing, sales, and retention. So let's see how these three things stack up to the three types of people that might be starting an agency, and this should give you a clear picture of where you should go. So the first group is people with a niche audience, like a YouTube channel or a course or some kind of following somewhere online where people already know, like, and trust them. These people have already knocked out all of the marketing and most of the sales as someone with a niche audience. And so all that's left is figuring out retention, which is manageable. And these are the people that I see just explode here. Julie Chanel has a great software built on HighLevel. Gooston's son got 100 HighLevel users overnight on his white labeled SaaS because he had an audience. And another friend of mine whose business will remain anonymous also crushed with this model and got to like 20K MRR in a day because he had already sold like 3,000 people into his course. So if this is you, you've got some sort of niche audience, I say go for it. There's probably not a better model out there to be pursuing. However, that's a small percentage of people. Most people are going to fall into the next two buckets. The first of which is that you don't have an audience, but you're a really experienced marketer. If you're in this boat, you could absolutely go the SaaS route. All I have to say is good luck, and you need to be very, very patient. You've got about 6 months of prep work to get everything ready so that you've actually got a good brand with good retention processes built before you actually launch. And then once you've launched, you probably got about 2 years of grinding to get to that critical mass point where you're going to be making more money with less effort than you would with an agency. So it's totally doable. It's just not an overnight thing. And that brings me to the last group, which is you don't have an audience and you're brand new to this whole game. In this case, I strongly recommend that you do not start a pure SaaS business. You should stick with an agency and use HighLevel as part of your offer, but you should not just offer HighLevel. And there are two reasons for this. First of all, cash flow. If you're only collecting $200 per client maximum that you bring on, it's going to take way more clients to get to the point where you can quit your job, where you can stop doing this as a side hustle and really dive into it. If you do SaaS, I promise you, you're going to be spending almost the same amount of time on every single client that comes on board. You might end up like my friend who said, you know, I was doing SMMA and then I transferred to doing SaaS because I heard about that model, and basically I just ended up selling discounted agency services. I can virtually guarantee that's what's going to happen to you if you're brand new to this game and you try to go the SaaS route. And the second reason here is experience. Look, if you're brand new, you haven't gone through your rocky cutscene yet. You haven't put in the long, arduous hours of really learning what makes a business tick and how to grow it. Sean Clark himself could not sell HighLevel to small businesses, and that's why he sells it to agencies. All of the clients except one that he sold on a HighLevel churned because he didn't have the time or the expertise why they needed the software and how to make it work for them. So whenever you talk to him about this, he says, the reason I love HighLevel so much is that we're putting the power into the hands of the marketing agencies, the people who understand marketing, so that it can be a small business to small business communication versus this massive faceless software company like Podium who's just going to sell the software and then run away. The thing is, how can you actually help the businesses unless unless you're spending a lot of one-on-one time with them, really diving into what makes them tick and grow. You can't. And so what you should do is charge more so you can quit your job sooner and give them more services so you can learn more along the way. And then once you've gathered all of this knowledge, you can decide if SaaS is right for you 3, 4, 5 years down the road. If you don't have real world marketing experience, you can just kiss your retention goodbye, because you're not going to be able to A, market your own business well enough, and B, explain the value proposition of the software to people well enough for them to understand why they need it long term. Now, if after listening to all of this, you're like,
Keaton, I do have a little bit of marketing expertise under my belt. I feel really passionate about this SaaS model. I think I can make it work.
I'm excited for you. What I would say is don't rely on the software for your only source of revenue. If I were to wake up tomorrow and the only business I could start was a SaaS business with GoHighLevel, I would create a course for my niche on how to grow their business, and I would sell them that first. And then I would offer my software as a solution to all of the marketing things they need to do if they want to follow the steps in my course. That way I can finance the client acquisition with an information product up front that's very, very high margin and easier to sell than software. And then I can warm people up through the course, convince them that the software is the right decision for them, and grow the business that way. However, that does require that you actually know what you're doing when it comes to marketing. That's it for this one today, folks. If you want to check out how I used HighLevel inside of my agency, click on this video. See you next time.